forum meeting. So just a couple of notes first. Just please turn microphones to mute when you're not talking. If your signal comes out, as we all know does happen, please just come back in and we'll let you back into the meeting. We'll use the question hand. So if you put your hand up, you will have a question, please use the hand symbol. If your device isn't working, please type a message in, and myself and Neil will be monitoring that throughout the meeting. And when we come to voting agendas, we'll use a thumbs up. So we'll be asking you to put your thumbs up if you're for, against, or abstain. Okay. So we'll start with agenda 1, item 1, which is apologies, Neil. So I can hand over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. We have apologies from Jane Burrows, Phil Johnson, Larry Granelli, Kevin Griffiths, Anthony Dix, and Sean Taylor. So they're school forum members. We also have apologies from the 2 assistant directors, Andy Felton and Ian Budd. So there isn't a assistant director update on the agenda today, unfortunately. So I apologise for that.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Okay, we've just got an extra item in today because we'd like to welcome to School Forum Jeff Morgan. Welcome, Jeff. Jeff is our new portfolio holder for education and learning. Would you like to say a welcome, Jeff? Oh, I think you're on mute still, Jeff.
You'd have thought by now I would have worked that out. Hello, everyone. As has been said, I'm Jeff Morgan, new Cabinet Portfolio Holder. Before the elections, I was the Portfolio Holder for Children's Services. He obviously thought I was underemployed and so asked me to take over schools as well, which was a surprise and a challenge. I'm looking forward to it. I'm also looking forward to meeting as many of you as possible in your own schools when the fog lifts. So I hope to be coming around and talking to a few of you individually. But it's nice to be with you.
Thank you, Jeff, and you'll be absolutely welcome of all of our sessions and schools. Okay, so we'll move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is voting and actions from the last meeting and the matters for decision. So I'll hand that over to Neil. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry, Neil. Perfect.
Sorry, Nikki. Right. Yeah, thank you, Nikki. So first off, if we can agree that the voting and actions from last meeting are a true and accurate record. If there's anybody that has any comments to make that would suggest they're not, otherwise I'll take them that they are an accurate record. So if we just go down through the actions on 3, balances on the 4 blocks DSG will be included in the future DSG monitoring reports. There isn't one at this meeting because it's just too early in the financial year and we'll only be picking up 1 or 2 months of expenditure. Admissions services. Yes, I mean, Byrne was due to bring back a report to this meeting, but it's been further delayed. I can let schools forums know that it will come back to September. It will not be any further delays to this report. And I understand that Jane has confirmed who the officers were at the working group. For those people that weren't at the previous meeting, this has been dragging on for a little while, but most of the officers that were on the working group have left the authority. So we're just trying to get an idea of what was agreed at that working group. The Academy's update number 8. Yes, I mean, I have now updated the reports to reflect what mats are involved in schools that have converted to academies. And that's it. And there was an action under item 9, but that was for individual schools forum members to contact Dwayne to volunteer in supporting the SEND and Inclusion Change Programme work streams.
Thanks, Neil. Does anybody have any comments or questions? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 3 of the agenda. Item 3 is the consultations timetable for 2021 to 22. This is an item for approval, so at the end of the item we'll have 3 areas that we'll have to cast a vote on. So I'll hand over to Neil again, please.
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, so item 3 is a paper which is outlined in the timetables for this year to do with funding for next year, for 22-23. There's 3 areas that we have to consult with schools on. The first is dedelegation, and that's something that comes around every single year. We will be looking at consulting earlier this year, so we'll be consulting within the next couple of weeks with schools, with the deadline being in September, with the intention of us actually bringing back the results of that consultation to schools forum in September. Previously it was in December, so it was later, but I think because the services need a bit more time to plan, if the schools decide not to carry on with dedelegation, we're bringing it into the September meeting this year. The second area is around the scheme for financing maintained schools. Further guidance was published by the ESFA in March, but there was nothing in there that meant that we had to change any of our guidance. Part of their suggestions, we'd already had it in our guidance, so that was quite positive. So this is, again, it's for maintained schools, just to approve the reasons for us not changing the scheme this year. And the third item is for all schools forum members to vote on, and that is the timetable for us consulting on any changes to the national funding formula and any potential transfer of 0.5% of the schools block DSG into the high needs block DSG. This will take place once we know what the provisional settlement is in August, so we're just trying to plan ahead at this stage. So we've got schools forum approval for the programmes and timetables. And as always, Nikki, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand. Okay, no questions coming through, Neil, so we'll move on to voting. So we'll go for the first item, and this is for maintained schools representatives only to vote for, and this is to approve the timetable for the delegation for 2022 to 23. So if you're for, please can you put a thumb up now, please?
Yeah, that's all the maintained school representatives are in favour of that proposal.
Fantastic. Thank you. So hands and thumbs down, please. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 2, which is for all maintained schools to vote, and this is to note and approve the reasons for not changing the scheme for finance and maintained schools. So again, please, could you put some up? Raise your hand. Thank you.
Again, that's everybody. Thank you, Nikki.
Fantastic. We put thumbs and hands down. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to number 3, and this is for all school forum representatives to approve the timetable for any potential need to consult with schools on the national funding formula and any potential 0.5 application. Okay, so again, if you're for, please raise now. Thank you.
Looks like about 10 people in favour.
Okay, so if we put hands down, please.
And there are currently, I think, 16 schools forum members in the meeting at the moment, so there may be 6 people that didn't vote.
Okay, so I'll move on to against. So if everyone's hands are down, or I think you might have 3 of definite down.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know Martin,
yep,
Matthew and Clive didn't raise their hands.
My apologies, Neil. This is the disapplication we're voting for, is it now? That we've all. This is for us. Sorry, I was in favour of that one.
Yeah. Okay, I've got Martin, Matthew, Mary Ann's in favour. So it looks like I've got 15 in favour. So that's unanimous in any event.
Fantastic.
Unless someone does want to make a vote against it, but I don't think anybody is.
No.
I'm sorry, this is a bit tricky. Trying to.
Okay.
Okay.
Fantastic. Okay, so we put all hands down, please. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 4 of the agenda, which is the Send and Inclusion Change Programme. This is a matter of comments only after the report's been shared. Ross has written the report, and Dwayne, are you sharing it with us?
I am, yes, I am.
Fantastic, thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So this is an update in terms of where we are with Send and Inclusion Change Programme. Different position this year to where we were last year when I was speaking at the Schools Forum. So just to recap in terms of our vision around the programme and what we're trying to achieve, I think first and foremost it is about improving outcomes for our children and young people within Warwickshire. It's for us to make decisions within a clear, fair, transparent way. One of the main things was to make sure that all the sort of systems we have in place are sustainable for the future, and that we are as best we can be in terms of the allocated funding living within our means, and making sure that really the pathway to secure employment, training and independent lives of our young people are in place. There are 31 projects in the Send and Inclusion Change Programme, and we started the programme, I would say, this time last year, so it has been 12 months since we've started. Each project has developed a PPD, which is a project proposal document, and they're all held on virtual. When we map out the projects, we map out what is actually happening, so is the as is. And then we map out the to be, what the new systems or new model or different project would look like. We then take to the governance board, and then from that governance board, then we agree and go live with the implementation. There's about 15 projects that are active and 7 projects that are actually live at the moment, and 6 are developing into full business cases. I've attached, and Ross has attached, the list of projects. And again, it's linked to the DSG recovery, which we had to develop as a council last year because of the overspend we had on the high needs block. Again, we've also attached the SEN2 benchmarking data, which compares us against regional, against statistical and against national trends in terms of where we are SEND. So the impact so far, I mean, in terms of the quality performance measures, we report all these quality performance measures to the SEND Partnership Board, and that's a multidisciplinary board consisting of education, health and social care, along with our parent and carers. We also deliver this to the Send and Inclusion Change Programme Board, which sits on our strategic directors. So in terms of the DSG outturn report, on the high needs block, it was 63.71 million, above the allocated resource of 55.10 million. So the overspend was 8.6 million, but actually that was less than forecasted in period 11. But again, it was higher than the forecast from the April 2020. So what we're struggling with at the moment and what we're working on to be able to get the full sort of financial impact is on a module which we attach into Synergy. And, you know, it's been a project within the Send and Inclusion Change Programme to make sure we know exactly where the money is and we have oversight completely of where all our spend is. But in saying that, there is some positive news I can report today in terms of looking at the strategy, the SEN strategy, and looking at the change programme. So what is it telling us? In terms of the data, when I joined last year, the data wasn't in a positive trajectory. That we had less children than regional, statistical and national going into mainstream. That's a different story this year. We've seen a positive increase in children going to the local mainstream schools, so that's really good. We've also seen more of our children supported in our local state-funded specialist settings, as we've increased the number there in our settings there. Again, what we have seen is percentage of children and people attending ISPs, and ISPs tend to be a high cost independent specialists. We've seen a reduction in the number of children while we've been attending them, whilst we've been able to meet their needs within the local communities and local schools. In terms of our resource provision strategy, we have now established all the resource provisions, and we have seen an increase in the amount of children attending the resource provisions. And then when we look at the growth of plan, when I looked at the growth of plans for Warwickshire and I compared them against all the benchmarking tools, we were off kilter quite a lot. So we've brought the growth in line now with national trends, which is quite significant. So it's reduced from 12% down to 4.1%, which is, roughly where we should be. So again, the number of EHC plans in preschools, I think, is still relatively low. And we have a project running at the moment to look at how we can put that early intervention, early support and wrap around that care around our little ones. We have created new cost centres, so that gives us, greater monitoring, and we sort of sorted the budgets with our finance, colleagues. It's been really good teamwork in terms of making sure that we know where the money is and that we have greater oversight of it. We've also created cost centres to monitor our use of alternative provision. When I joined last year, and I compared us, we were really, really off kilter. Some authorities' use of AP was about 1%, ours was about 34%. So it was way off what we should have been. So we've really, really worked hard around that, and we are monitoring the spend because as the demand for AP grew, so did the cost of each placement grow. The one thing that's not been sort of wholly positive, but I think quite understandable, we projected last year that we would increase our use of internships, supported internships for children and young people. Unfortunately, with COVID, that's been hit significantly. So we've not had that growth in that area. And ultimately, where young people have not moved into internships, what we have seen is an increase of children remaining in education. So obviously, that will put additional financial pressure on the system. Thank you to all the members that contacted us, and I know working alongside Ross in terms of looking at the top-up funding and how we can get more funding into schools and how we can do it in different ways. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time on that. We are still working because our data is telling us that our strategy is going in the right trajectory. We have more children, as I said, remaining within our communities, remaining within maintained schools and within our own special schools. So we are still working around the finance because we will expect the finance to follow that trajectory as well in terms of send. I have one more service review that I'm doing, and that is excuse me, that is Sendar. Once that finishes, and that should finish at the end of August, then I will be looking at it on a strategic level and how we deliver services to schools and how we can get that support in as early as possible. So any questions? I'm happy to sort of answer any questions.
Okay, Faye, I think you were first. Would you like to go first?
Hi, thank you very much. I've just got a few questions on things that I couldn't reconcile between the report and the appendix. So in the report it says about AP, but the appendix seems to suggest that we don't have any AP.
So yeah, and that's something, Faye, in terms of the reporting that's been happening.
Yeah.
So when I looked at that and how we've been reporting, if you look on the SEN2 data benchmarking, there's a column that says other, and what we've not been doing is putting the children in AP, we've been putting them in other. So if you look at the other column, that should be on your graph, and if it's not Appendix 4, I'm happy to send that through. The other is way off kilter to all the other authorities. So that is where our colleagues, so this year it shouldn't happen, because I've said if children in AP, they need to be registered in AP. So, but that's where they're all sitting. Yeah.
That's good, thank you, that clears that one up. So decrease in number of EHCPs, which obviously has a positive financial implication, but has there been a reduction in requests? So, and in which case, where, I don't know, understanding the pots of finance, where does the budget sit for tribunals and mediation? Is that within this budget, and is that perhaps why we're seeing an overspend?
Yeah, so when we look at mediation and tribunals in terms of the whole spend around SEND, I mean, it's a small percent, 0.1% of the whole spend. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that is the route of redress for families. You know, that's outlined in the Code of Practice under Chapter 11. You know, families are not happy with the decision that the local authority make, then that is the route of redress. So that's something that really is out of our control, although what I want to say is that we are in line with national trends in terms of our tribunals, which is currently 1.7%, and that is, you know, on line with that national. In terms of the requests haven't come down. The amount of requests coming in are still significantly high, and again, you know, we are launching the SEND guidance this week or next week, our colleagues, and that looks at the assess plan do review and what schools are expected to deliver under that assess plan do review process. The number of plans that are being issued have decreased, and, you know, to put in context, we are above. So, you know, the myth that Warwickshire don't give out plans isn't correct. We do give out more plans than our regional, statistical and national neighbours. So what we want to do is bring that in line. So we need to bring that down by a couple of percentage, which is, you know, we are on that trajectory to achieve that now. So yes, but we have gone up this year to 3.6%, which is still significant.
So it was just, again, then going on from that, obviously we brought down the costs associated with that, but how are we tying that into actual experiences? So impacts in not just educational outcome terms, but in terms of, you know, children's social, emotional, mental health, and also the impact that is having on schools, having children perhaps with more challenging behaviours. You talked about SENDAR, but also where in the plan, where in the strategy is about the upskilling of the workforce to better support the more complex needs that are now being supported in mainstream.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So in terms of, I'm looking across the whole piece because, you know, in terms of this budget, it isn't a school's budget only. You know, this budget is targeted at early years and at post-16 up to 25. So whilst the DSG just covers your school age population, this budget covers 0 to 25.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it is, you know, even if a child leaves, it's going to continue spending on this budget for quite a few years. So in terms of, I mean, ultimately, we want to be able to support children without a plan, because once we tie a child into a plan, that's a tie-in for potentially 25 years. What we are looking is early intervention, and I've developed the CEF over the last few weeks with colleagues, and certainly in terms of the strategy, there are things we can be doing, and the service reviews fee that I'm doing with my services is how can we get that support in. So I will be looking at how we can deliver that at different times. So, for example, the 0 to 25, the 0 to 5 is looking at how we can extend the project there. At the moment, we are only covering 0 to 4-year-olds. And therefore, when the children are coming into schools, they're coming into schools without the support for colleagues. And therefore I've asked that team to look at how we can increase that level of support to school. Similarly, if we are putting the right support in from birth from that child and wrapping that child around an education, health and care plan, then the likelihood is when they're transitioning into school that they're going to come in with that right level of support instead of schools getting to a crisis point. We'd also do workforce development. So I've done across within my portfolio, I have sort of just about 300 staff. So what we've done is looked across the service to see what skill sets we have and how can we deploy that, as well as extending some of my services. So one of the things I'm looking at is to extend the EP service into early years, because at the moment that's not the case. And again, we are looking at what schools need. So we're looking at Nurture, Thrive and stuff to see what we can roll out as free of charge. So that is all in hand. Yeah.
So that's for the children that are currently in the education system. So obviously for those coming forward, hopefully the approach will be completely different. But those already in the system who perhaps have requested needs assessments and have not had a plan, and in schools who are experiencing challenging behaviour from them, it's what's the support right now for our school colleagues and for those children and young people who may not be attending full time.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah, so I think in terms of that, I mean, I want to make clear, although SMEH is one of our high needs, it's not the only need we have, and challenging behaviour. So when we look at SEN, we've got some of the most complex of children with profound and multiple learning difficulties, as well as children with challenging behaviours. So what we do have at the moment, the system is still set up the same in terms of this traded arm. So we've got a specialist teaching service under the traded arm that can be bought in. We have, we have specialisms within our EP service now with autism specialism. I know schools subscribe to the EP service as well. So all them are remaining the same, because at the moment what we are looking to do is change that offer. So the level of support schools access to our traded arm as well as the statutory arm. So the minute we set up the needs assessment, hasn't changed as yet, Faye. That remains the same.
It did say there was a reduction in the STS, so there'd been a cost saving in the specialist teacher service and in IDS. Yeah, one of them said.
No.
I'm trying to have a look where I saw that.
But we have not cut any of the services at all. So the STS is a traded service, specialist teaching service, so nothing's changed. I'm reviewing the services, but nothing's changed.
I'm sure I read that somewhere, that there'd been a cost in a cost saving. Yeah, if I find it, I'll come back. But thank you ever so much for answering those questions so detailed, and I'll let someone else answer.
Thank you, Faye, for the thoughtful, reflective questions. Okay, Martin, over to you.
Three. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
It's 4.3 about this issue of the SEN finance module, and it's been delayed. I mean, how long is the delay? And perhaps as important or more, what are the implications?
Yeah, I mean, I think the implications are not dire, to be honest, Martin, because we keep the information is on a spreadsheet at the moment. What we didn't want to do as an organisation is have our financial on spreadsheets. We wanted it on our actual systems. Yep. The issues we've had is the system we use, which is Synergy. Synergy are at that point where they're not investing, the company itself is not investing in that system anymore. So, we've had to go out and get a specialist in. We've gone out to recruitment to get a specialist in to do it now. I think there is a bigger question for the council and a bigger discussion outside of here, obviously, is, what systems do we use in the future? But that's, not part of my plate. But it's not to changing anything. It's just that it's a harder task for us and more man hours to actually go through spreadsheets than it would be if we had that portal sitting on the system.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, Marianne?
Nope.
Or things just click back on mute again, Marianne.
Sorry, slip back on. Hi, Dwayne. I've just got a couple of questions. You mentioned in the talk that you're hoping to put the P service into early years settings. Can you tell me exactly what that looks like and what's involved in that?
Well, at the moment, Faye, when I looked at my, Mary-Ann, sorry. Yeah. At the moment, the early years sector, it is the early years team that sit within my portfolio, the IDS 0 to 5 team that actually serve that sector. What happens is that they maintain the child at, SEN support through the sector. What I'm finding and what I've looked at when I looked at the data, then a big clump of children, like 121, come at a certain month. Right, now that puts pressures on everybody's services to get through 121 children of needs assessments. So what I've said is we know when our babies are born, we know that information, and how are we capturing that information coming into the system. So we can bring that age group and spread them children out. So make sure that, if you've got a child with Down syndrome, born with Down syndrome, they're going to need a plan. So why are we waiting until they're 4 to give them a plan when we could give that the minute they go into the sector? What I found out, and I've just been just over a year, was because the early years team work with the children, the EP service don't come and get involved until that child is going for a needs assessment. So what's happened is I'm almost funding the same thing 3 times. So the EP are the statutory service that needs to undertake that EHC needs assessment, and they are a must for the local authority. But I've got the early years sector doing that needs assessment. If STS involved, they do it. And if the EP comes in, they end up referring to them reports because they've not even met the child. Yeah. So I don't think that's right. Yeah, because the person we need there in that sector at the earliest opportunity is our educational psychology service. So what I'm looking to do is to say, okay, we need to bring that in. Yeah. I'm looking at capacity, and I'm looking at both the traded versus the core model. But I can't look in isolation, Mary-Ann. I have to look at it on a strategic, because one is almost interdependent on another, and is how we all work together around that child. So that's what I'm looking to do, is say, no, you cannot just be involved at the point where that child needs a needs assessment. You need to be in with that family at an earlier, and with colleagues in that sector.
And Dwayne, I agree with you. I think that there is some duplication, and I think that it would be hugely beneficial to have the EPs involved at a much earlier stage. Certainly for those children that we know, like a Down syndrome child or a child with, physical needs, where it's known very early on. Sometimes the needs don't manifest in a child until they're 2, turning 3, when their language comes in, and when sometimes you see the challenging behaviour come in. So it's a little bit more difficult then, and that's why the HCPs happen in the summer term before they go to school. So I'm hugely, I'm delighted to hear that you're trying to get the EPs in a little bit earlier. I do have to come back to funding. I was talking to the IDS ladies last week, and I know that they're going to lose somebody and they're not going to be replaced. I think some of the delay that's causing these EHCPs to not come through until the summer term before they go to school is because it takes so long for IDS. Their backlogs are huge, absolutely huge, and it takes them forever to get to us. And I'm really concerned that they're losing a full-time member of staff and they're not going to be replaced.
Yeah, but that's not actually correct, Mary-Ann. So that's not actually correct. What I've said is because obviously we have factored in the reviews to finish at the end of August, and what I've said, until we know what the model of delivery is, across all the services, as I said, there's 300 staff that I'm looking at how we deploy them staff. What do we deliver? How are we going to deliver it? For me, what I've said to the team is we had 1 vacant post, and I said let's not appoint until we know absolutely where the service delivery is. Okay. But it should not affect in any way. And I think for me, going back to early identification, we had started identifying our children with special needs in utero by maternity services. So parents that carry genetic disorders, and I'm one of them, parents, we have in utero tests to make sure, so we know more often now when we're having a child born with a genetic disorder, that information can be shared. And we also have 6 to 8 week checks with our health visitors. We need to be picking up early identification. For some of our most complex children, we shouldn't have to be doing assess plan do review. We know they are. The need itself is, the complexity of that need should warrant a needs assessment. It shouldn't have to go through that process, so that the family, when they start in their nursery, they should be coming in at that process. Now that means you probably won't need IDS to do all the assess plan to work with that sector. So that releases that capacity then for me to deploy into schools to do that transition journey through the sector. So, it's not that we're not appointing, it is the fact that we have to take a breath, take a step back. It's been a really busy year, and we have to do this on a strategic level, not a reactionary level.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that, and I understand that you're looking at a far more strategic level. But on the ground, that does make everybody's jobs much more difficult. And and we sort of sometimes feel that we're failing these children and these families because it's taking so long from identification through to actually anything happening, and certainly to getting any sort of funding whatsoever takes forever. And it's and they've left the setting before there's any funding coming in, although there's been a vast amount of work gone into their cases. And some nurseries where they've got 50, 60, 70% of their children have got some sort of special needs, they're drowning because they haven't got the additional funding to go with that.
And Mary, I absolutely agree with you, and I don't think, and one of the things I'm quite passionate about is to make sure that we identify at the earliest, that we put that support in. We do know for some children, there's an emerging need, some things we can sit and wait because we know that developmental and, could potentially change that. But for some children, you're absolutely right. We shouldn't have them go into settings unless they're absolutely wrapped in the right support.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm keen to make sure that we look at and we work on.
Okay.
And I just want it is a big tanker, this tanker I'm driving, and there's a big one too, but we are going in the right direction.
Yeah, overall, I think it's a fabulous job, and the amount of initiatives that you started is amazing. But I'm just here to fight my little corner for the nurseries. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Marianne. And Marianne, if I can add in, as a school board member who is currently on the EHCP top-up panel, we are absolutely looking at from that north onwards. We're going through it in a lot of detail and looking at what that will look like. So be rest assured that we are doing that in those meetings too.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nikki.
Okay, if we go back to Faye.
Hi, thanks. I found where I've seen it. It's in the DSG report. So the DSG outturn report says in 3.3 that there were overspends in the high needs block, but these were offset by underspends in the following major areas, of which SEND integrated services, so specialist teacher service and integrated disability, have had reductions in the 2020-21 year, and obviously that is a concern that those services that are there to be traded or as part of the statutory model, they can only be traded if there's capacity.
Yeah, so I don't think that gives a true indication. So let me explain to you in terms of where we are with some of these services. We have a point. So if you look at a traded model, which some of these services have traded, and you think of COVID, or you think if you don't subscribe to traded, if your subscriptions are not enough to cover your staffing, then you're overstaffed. So if you think of STS as a traded model, so what we need to make sure is that the core staff to run the core business is in place. What we can't do if the subscriptions are coming in is appoint staff if we haven't got any revenue to pay their salaries, because that just becomes a cost for the local authority. So what we have done, we knew with the DSG budget that there were shortfalls in the budget set. We've worked. What we've done is hold recruitment to natural wastage. So nobody's been made redundant. We've had staff that have left post, but actually when we've done the reviews of my service areas, we are overstaffed in some areas, yeah, and carrying staff. So what we can't do is keep appointing staff when we're not having the work coming in to cover it. And I know you think, oh, we're really busy, but you know, I am looking at this under a microscope. So we are balancing out one budget because we're not filling empty vacancies, which some of them have been there for a while. So it's not an thing.
Yeah, it would be good to know from school colleagues really, in terms of why they're not buying into that. So is there genuinely not demand, or is it school budgets can't afford to buy into those traded services, or are they seeking alternatives outside of the local authority? It's why
thing. I mean, it is a bit of everything, and because my portfolio is so big, obviously I can't go into that finite detail, but you've got some people who are buying other people. Academies now with the teaching schools will use their own resources. The EP service is really well subscribed under traded model. But again, if we look at the medical needs, because I obviously manage that service, children have been at home, so we're now carrying staff in there because children are not access to medical needs. So it is it's a quite complex picture. So it's not just it's not just one thing. It's quite a few things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Faye. Okay, over to Rose.
Thank you. I suppose my question was more to do with the impact of COVID and sort of foreseeing. I was surprised you've had so many EHCPs go forward. From our point of view, being an infant school, our children come into us. They didn't go to nursery prior to us because of the COVID. And so therefore, we call those children the children with hidden needs. They've not been seen by professionals. They've not been seen by IDS. They've not been seen by STS. They've not been seen by the EP services. So for us, we've got a backlog to catch up on. So we predict that our EHC applications, need assessments, will increase. And I'm just thinking, is that not the same for everyone next, academic year, where everyone's trying to catch up with those children that have not been seen by those professionals?
So I think there's a few things there in terms of, and obviously, I've been looking at the data across education, health and social care. So I'm looking at everything at a granular level now. I haven't been here a year. One of the things I've said is when do these checks and identifications start? And they do start in utero, so maternity do their checks. Now, if they're not reporting them to us, there's an opportunity missed there, isn't there? And then we got our 6 to 8 week checks. Now, I know my friend's baby got identified with Down syndrome at our 6 to 8 week check. Yeah, if she didn't have that, then that would have been missed, because the next check from that is your 2-year-old checks and then your nursery. So what we have is, you are right, we have a cumulative effect of, if children have missed each of them goalposts or their milestones in their journey, there are some children that are not being identified, and that is worrying for me. So what I am looking for is how do we, from our health colleagues, have that pathway of information come from there into us, so that we actually, even if the families don't come forward, because they might not want to send their children to early year settings, they are actually somewhere, what I call on the pipeline data, so we actually know our community and we know it well, and therefore we can then obviously, provide for schools and know that our children with that high need is going to hit us in such a year and will require, a certain placement. So it's efficiency of school place planning, but at a more sort of granular level, really. So yes and no. I mean, the applications didn't stop coming in during COVID. The same level we had coming in as we did the year before, whether that because Senko's a little bit more time to do the work. I don't know. What I do know is that statistically we are still above in terms of we 3.6 and it is 3.2 the national. So we are giving out more plans than nationally. So I think we need to also recognise that as well.
I suppose I think that's key what you just said. It's about high needs. We're mainstream, so we don't experience those complex needs typically that some schools do. I think what we're seeing, where we're most affected, will be the 2-year checks, because we have significantly high numbers of children imagine most people do, that are starting to sort of appear to be on the spectrum. So, of our mainstream school, and we're not very big, we've got 10% of our population are either got a diagnosis or are awaiting a diagnosis, and it doesn't become obvious until they hit. So I think that's worth for me bearing in mind, those checks. But it's then sort of families are wanting desperate support then when they realise the challenges around a child who then doesn't want to conform or follow the rules in a mainstream school, because up until that point they've had a bit more freedom and choice in their life.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of the need, you're talking about ASD, some of the strategies for teaching children on the spectrum are actually good teaching strategies for all children. So
it is. It's just frustrating for the parents because it's such a long waiting list and they just want answers.
But I think if we go to a need-led system rather than a diagnostic system, then if the needs are presenting, we can deal, we should have the strategies to deal with the needs that are presenting rather than awaiting a diagnosis for that.
And you're right, but equally, as a parent of somebody like that, where it's not recognised because she was a girl, it's hard to get people to listen because they're still waiting for that diagnosis, even though you're saying, well, this is where we're at. So yeah.
Thank you, Rose. Okay, Fergus.
Thank you. Yes, I
sorry, Faith. Fergus next.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Oh, hi, it's Fergus. I'm the chair of governors at Campion Academy. But I'm also the SEND governor, and last week I met up with the people that run our SEND unit, and I'm going to keep it quick on this, but I just wanted to pass back to you that the pressure that they feel about how complex to fill out an EHC plan is now, and how that workload has really increased into schools. And the number of appeals and tribunals now that our school is going through, that again has upped the workload. There's much more now than that has been in the past, and the need for resources when we're putting children back into mainstream, and just in terms of classroom space, in terms of extra staff, that has to be addressed against the policy of reducing the numbers that we've got here. Really, that's all I wanted to say. The departments are feeling a huge pressure, and the role of filling out the EHP plans has been split into 3 now, where it used to be done by 1. So that just sort of shows the amount of work that's now needed for a school like ours to get in place an EHC plan for a pupil. And another thing is that we have had a number of cases of refused provision for pupils into specialist schools. Again, it's anecdotal and it's not, but I just thought I'd feed back to you on that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, Fergus, and I understand that. And in terms of, we have to set, the code of practices allow us to set a criteria in terms of who in the authority or in the county have education, health and care plans. If we were to, if every child that entered into the authority had one, this budget would be twice the budget it is now, and we would have twice the deficit that we have. So, we have to be, in terms of decision making, make sure that we're absolutely clear and the evidence base required to allow that child to go through the needs assessment and in the end have an education health and care plan must be, as robust that it can be. So, I absolutely understand that. I was a SENCO myself for many years, do you know what I mean, and ran many sort of resource provisions and special schools. So, I'm not ignoring that fact at all. But, in terms of tribunals, that is a drain on resources. Absolutely, I agree with you, but for some, it is the route of redress. It is in Chapter 11, the Code of Practice. We have families that don't go to mediation. We are happy to meet with families to say why, we made that decision. But the route of redress is there. They just bypass the mediation, they go straight to a tribunal. I can't stop that, unfortunately, because at every decision we make, we open up that route to the courts. But actually, I would rather use that resource in a different way. And we have seen a massive increase in tribunals across England as a whole. It's not just here, and I have data on that. I'm happy to share it with you. But when you look at some authorities, we're nowhere near as bad. But and we are feeling that because I have to divert resources elsewhere to go to court as well to represent. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like I've got one more hand up, so Faye, if you want to come in again.
Hi, thanks again. More, I guess, a philosophical question, really, in that all these requests, I've looked at, the large proportion or common request for EHCP in England, so presumably will be similar for Warwickshire, are for EHC plans for autism spectrum disorder and for associated challenges, ASD and ADHD, neither of which are diagnosable at a young age, and many, unless the difficulties are very severe, are not picked up until much later in the child's journey, whether that's in primary or secondary school. I'm a parent of 2 children who are both autistic and ADHD, and I have ADHD myself. I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 41, and my kids were 8 and 11. And it's only as the system got more challenging for them that those needs became more apparent. And there's never going to be a way that that's picked up earlier. As you said, autism-friendly teaching strategies work for all children. It's good practice for all children. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we not liaising as an authority with the Autism Education Trust, for example, and embedding that pedagogy into our approach? As you all know, you've heard me talk a lot today. I'm good at raising questions and challenging things that are in place. So my kids are fine, but all of those other people that don't know those things, they're the ones that are stuck, and they're the ones that loggerheads with schools who won't believe until there is a diagnosis, schools who have been on a tick box autism awareness training and yet still don't know that a behaviour is communication of a need, and are not supporting it and are punishing children, and these are when the needs are escalating within schooling. It's challenging for the schools, it's challenging for the children, it's challenging for the family. What are we doing as an authority at that root cause? Because everything else we're doing just seems superfluous without actually tackling that. And I know you're not responsible for the world, Dwayne, but obviously
I can try and be fair.
What are we doing?
So we are doing a few things. So when we talk about the Autism Education Trust, we do liaise with them. So we have got a relationship with them. In terms of, and it's something I'm looking at further to increase, and I did this, in my previous role. But actually, we know waiting lists are long for diagnoses. We know that. I know that. That's a national problem as well. Unfortunately, I haven't got a magic wand that I could sort that overnight. But what I can do is look at what we deliver in the interim period. So we've got things like Early Bird and Signet that we could be expanding. I think, something we're looking at in terms of who's trained. Can the trainer change the trainer and deliver that? How we work with our special schools to make sure that we can pick in, the resource out there. I mean, it's been quite a dynamic year to get to where we are now, even. But, we have autism specialists. I mean, one of our EPs wrote a book, absolutely, and won a book award for writing a book around young ladies with autism. So we have, that specialist within the services. As I've said, Faye, I've got to get my services all reviewed. I've got to look across 300 staff and say, okay, this is what we've got. What do we need to do, and how do we need to deploy it to make sure, because SMH, speech, language and communication needs and ASD are the prevalence in Warwickshire. So you are right, we need to do more, and I am looking to see what we can do.
it's that in terms of, accountability for schools as well. It's all well saying they've got these things, but when budgets are stretched, as we know that budgets are stretched, it's about that prioritising. And it's a chicken and egg situation, really. There isn't an easy answer, but I think,
I'm
Thank
very thankful, Faye.
Thank you, Faye. Nick, can I bring you in?
Yeah, just to say on that, Faye, one of the things, Nick, I'm the head teacher at Evergreen Special School. One of the things we do is offer an outreach programme to our local mainstream schools. We've got one of our senior leaders as a Masters in Autism, and we provide a huge amount of autism training, have our open door policy for colleagues across the mainstream provision to come in and view specialist provision, and that's something we're really looking to build on. It's been difficult through COVID, but we can do it virtually as well. But there is a lot of other work going on the ground floor that you may not see, and a lot more. We've seen a lot of schools reaching out through Sendar, with the relationships that we've built, and I know that's the same across other special schools, that we're really looking to open the door and support as best we can. And just to add to, I suppose, the specialist advice and approaches, I know Warwickshire adopts the CERTS model, and that framework is, if you ever get a chance to look at CERTS, CERTS, that's the model that our EPs refer to, and is a specific autism approach, but again can be used for all children with various needs, and that is the basis of and a great model to go on, and that will inform next steps in terms of developing provision within the schools. So there is an awful lot going on, and the review of the services will mean that things will change, and it will take time to turn that ship, as Dwayne was saying, but there's a lot of really fantastic practice going out there, and I think it's just to say that it's okay for colleagues to reach out and try and find that expertise within the local area, and there's a lot of really great practice going on, and a lot of people who want to share. So just to add that into the picture.
Yeah, that's it. I think there are some amazing practitioners. There's some amazing schools out there, but still too often it's reliant on a specific school ethos. It's reliant on a specific practitioner within a school. It's not across the board, and that is a societal challenge.
And that's fair. When I started, it's about making it fair, transparent, and equitable. That we all have to play a part in this, and it can't be just one school because they do it well. We need to share that practice.
My school, we do get a lot of children with additional needs starting with us in reception. We're an infant school, and we do have really good practice, and we are very well respected locally. So people choose us, and that has then a knock-on effect on our partner school, and they've rapidly upskilled to meet that sort of need that we've kind of funneled to them. But it is still it's a difficulty.
Thank you. Thanks, Faye. Thanks, Nick. Dwayne, thank you so much for answering all our questions in such detail too. Okay. Is everybody happy to move on? I've got no more hands raised. Okay, we'll move on then. So we're now on agenda point 5, which is the DSG Outturn Report 2020 to 21. It's for information only, and there'll be a chance to ask questions afterwards. So I'll hand over to Panima. Thank you, Panima.
Thanks, Nikki. So first off, good afternoon, Schools Forum. So first off, I just want to apologise for the lateness of this report. I think it was only emailed yesterday to you all. We've had significant sickness in the team, and hence we just weren't able to get on top of producing the report as quickly as we would have liked. So apologies for that. The other thing is I would normally be supported when I'm presenting or a colleague presents this report by members of the team who are then able to give any specific details or detailed answers to questions that you have. And after Dwayne's incredibly comprehensive responses to all of your questions, I can only apologise if I'm not able to match that. But what I will do is make a minute of any questions you raise, and we will make sure that we come back with a robust response as soon as we can. So after that introduction, I will crack on with just presenting the highlights from the report. So the report is for information only. There's no decision to be made, and it is it's, if you like, the last of a series of reports. We tend to present the forecasting reports through the whole financial year. This is now the outturn report for last financial year. So if I take you to the table in section 2.1, That reminds the Schools Forum of the allocations that we have received in relation to DSG. So the gross allocation was 455 million. Recoupment was 222 million, which then left a net allocation across the 4 blocks of 233.813 million. Slightly different to what we reported in last Schools Forum in March, and that's simply because right at the end of March, DfE made a final adjustment to allocations. Moving on to sections 2.2 and 2.3, they highlight that our outturn position was an overspend of 5.314 million against our 4 blocks, and table 2.3 provides details of what our last forecast variance was to you back in March compared to the outturn variance. So you can see that actually the position improved. We were forecasting an overall overspend of 6.795, but we came in on an overspend of 5.314. The most significant reduction there being in the high needs block, which is a positive news story in terms of that reduction in the overspend that was being projected. As we've mentioned to you before, where local authorities have an expenditure variance which exceeds 1%, and ours is 1.17 overspend percentage in percentage terms, we will have to complete the recovery plan as set out by the DfE. We have obviously a very comprehensive recovery plan. We are just likely to be required to translate that into the format presented to us by DfE. So as soon as we have received that template, we will, and an instruction to do so, we will we'll crack on with that. Also worth noting that for the purposes of everything that gets presented to DfE, they do tend to look at the net position. So the net position being an overall overspend of 5.314. However, we can't actually in reality move funding between blocks, certainly in year, and we have to go through a very complex disapplication process to do that. So actually the most significant figure really is the 8.610 overspend rather than the overall net position. I just think it's important to highlight that. I'm sure you're all aware of it. Section 3 then provides explanations for the variances by block. I'll just go through those at a high level. So the 2.776 million underspend in the schools block is essentially made up from the contingency and growth fund and a few underspends on school improvement. It is worth noting that it was that forecast underspend in conjunction with a balance that was already in the reserve that funded these essentially the disapplication of 1.8 million in this financial year. So it's just worth noting that although that was the underspend, we have already utilised some of that to balance the schools block in this new financial year, as approved by Schools Forum through the course of the last financial year. High needs block was an 8.610 million overspend, which we've, or Dwayne certainly touched on.
I'm not sure I understand.
Apologies, that was my Apple Watch. People didn't understand what I was telling it, so sorry about that. So yes, that is made up of a number of overspends. The highest one obviously is the top-ups, and offset by a few underspends in some of the areas listed there as well. In the early years block, there is an underspend made up by the items in the bullet points that you can see in 3.5. Always worth noting though that the early years is subject to an adjustment that is made after we close the accounts down, and that adjustment is based on census data. So what we have done is we have tried to estimate what that adjustment might be, and our estimation is that adjustment might result in a clawback of about 619,000, but we have taken that into account when we close down the accounts. So even with that assumption, there is still an underspend of 262,000, which will go into the early years reserve. And then finally, there is a central school service block where the underspend was 258. And again, I think through the course of the financial year last year, we talked through the fact that the budget is being reduced on the CSSB, certainly the historical factors element of that year on year. So actually, it's not a bad thing that we underspent this year, because it actually will really help us to manage that reduction in future years. As Neil said at the start of the meeting, we are going to give you a reserve position each time we present the monitoring reports through the financial year. But what this table in section 4 provides you with is the closing balance of all of our 4 reserves for the DSG as at the end of last financial year. When we present the first monitoring report, we will then tell you which of those have already been in parts utilised, for example, the schools block, which I mentioned earlier on when I presented the schools block position. So I may have whizzed through that. I'm really happy to pause now, obviously, and take any questions. Myself and Neil will certainly try to respond as well as we can. If we can't, we will note them and come back to you.
Okay, if anyone's got any questions, please raise your hand. Oh, none coming through. No questions. Thank you, Panima.
Thank you, Nikki.
Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the forward plan, which I'll pass over to Neil.
Thank you, Nikki. So this is a standard item on Schools Forum. So we have the forward plan that goes through to March 22. I think it's just to highlight the provisional meeting that we put in for Thursday, the 11th of November. And this would be for Schools Forum to discuss the outcomes of any consultation that may take place on the national funding formula or any disapplication of funding between the schools block and the high needs block. I will shortly be setting up meetings for further into 2022 in line with what we agreed at last Schools Forum.
Fantastic, thanks Neil. Has anybody got any questions or reflections? No? Thanks, Neil. Okay, we'll move on to the final item, which is number 7, which is terms of business. And I can see Phil is joining through. So Phil, if there's anything you want to add into what I talk through with the report, please do. So as you can see, we've got a decision to make. So we'll have a discussion and we'll have an approval. So this is a recommendation of conduct of future meetings. So with the outbreak, we moved to virtual meetings. As you can see in the report, the guidance that now states that we can still continue to do virtual and we can do blended, a mixture of virtual and face-to-face if that's what we choose to do. If you look at 1.3, the new addition to paragraph 63 says that we must have the clerk's contact details so that if interested parties, members of the public, would like to attend, they know how to do so. We have been using Teams since we went into lockdown, and the meetings have been live streamed onto YouTube, and that's in line with how the council meetings are being conducted. Now, from future meetings, if we choose to do some on a virtual means, in 2.4, it points out that we can't no longer do it through YouTube because we don't have the Warwickshire ICT support to do that. So it would have to be looking at different methods, such as recording the meeting through Teams, putting it on the website. We'll have to look at how that works further. So our options are, as indicated in 2.2, we can continue with just virtual meetings. We can return to meetings being held in a venue in Warwick, or we can do a combination of both. Now, we've looked into neighbouring authorities, and the majority are doing virtual with one meeting that is a face-to-face. Now, I think good practice would be, if we are going to do that, is to have the election of the chair and vice chair. That would be a good meeting to have as a face-to-face meeting. We've got to make sure, as I said in 2.5, that a member of the public, if they want to contact the clerk in advance, we give them a Teams invite, or we join them in by phone, or we provide a place where they can go and watch and listen into the meeting. It is worth noting, as in 2.6, that there hasn't been a member of the public that's attended Schools Forum or requested to in 4 years, if not longer. So, any discussion points? Does anybody want to raise a hand? Has anybody got any feelings they want to discuss before we put it through to a vote? Phil?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I think that the virtual meetings have worked very well this year. I don't know what you think, Nikki. It's not always easy to see because you've got a lot of people on screen, but I do think that between us we've managed to deal with people's questions and conduct the business reasonably well. I think the thing that convinced me, I mean, I was doubtful about how well we could do this virtually at the beginning of the year. The thing that convinced me is that given the size of the county and that we're all distributed across the county, the ease of doing this meeting, where you just log in, do the 1.5 or 2 hours of it, and then you're free to go and do the rest of your day, rather than having to spend an hour each end of the meeting travelling to and from Warwick and finding somewhere to park. That, to me, it convinces me that if we can, we should continue to do this online.
Thank you, Phil. And it is, I think, one of the things that has come up is that the travel, the time, the parking. We know that the council buildings, we're going to have less places to be if we were going to meet face to face. Okay, if we go over to Faye.
Hi, thanks. Yes, just to say I agree really with Phil in terms of that making the most of everybody's time, but also, you know, the reduction in travel and impact on climate and things like that. I do like the idea of a once a year meeting so that you actually get that opportunity to meet people in person and things like that. I think that sounds like a good thing. It was just to note, you know, you say no one from the public has requested to join the meeting, but it would be interesting to know how many accesses of the recording and of the minutes that people have actually seen, because that doesn't mean there's not a public interest just because they haven't requested to attend. And ensuring that I know previously there used to be verbatim minutes and we decided not to do that as we were recording it. So it's, again, what's the best way to do that, whether it's recorded so that people can still have that transparency and it not create additional work for the clerk, really. I think probably that's a load off you, Neil, isn't it? Not having to transcribe verbatim minutes when you watch it.
It's fine. Yeah, I mean, we have had a few hits on the broadcast. I don't know how many we've had it in the live stream, but my concern is the hits might have been me replaying it so I can do the action. They couldn't actually tell me who was hitting the broadcast.
Yeah, sure.
But
I guess for transparency, it's one of those that you have to make it available, and you have to make it freely available because of the nature of it, really. So as long as we don't lose that, yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. And can we go to Penina?
Thank you. I just wanted to and actually Neil might want to come in on this. Just wanted to say that attendance at Schools Forum has really picked up actually since holding the virtual meetings. There were certainly some meetings where we were really concerned whether we would be quorate, 18 months ago. So that has turned around enormously since having virtual meetings. So I just wanted to mention that. I think that is another plus in the favour of continuing virtual meetings.
Thank you. And over to Phil.
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, I mean, I've sat on Schools Forum for a number of years, and I don't ever remember a member of public actually attending the meeting live when we were having it in Warwick. I did ask the question, though, that if in some time in the future something came up that there was a significant public interest in, that we would then find a way of live streaming the meeting so that people could take part in it. And that was the answer I was given.
Okay, thanks everyone for the discussion post. It's really good to hear. I think from the consensus, it feels like virtual meetings are the way forwards with one face-to-face. O'Neill, do you want to jump in?
No, so carry on. I'll just come in when you finish.
Are you sure? It feels that virtual with maybe one face-to-face when we elect the chair and vice chair. So I'll put that to the vote, but I'll let Neil come in first and then we'll put that to the vote. Oh, we've got Martin as well. So we'll do Neil first.
I was just going to say the same as you, Nikki, is that I would suggest that we have virtual meetings, but the meeting in June, which is the one where we elect the chair and vice chair of Schools Forum, is the one that's held face to face. So that would be the specific recommendation.
Fantastic, thank you, Neil. And Martin, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, I mean, I broadly support that. I think the thing that sways me is that Phil has said that the chairing has been adequate and effective, because obviously the one thing is the chair, and I'm no aspiration to be a chair, let me hasten to say, but the one thing is when you're in a meeting, the chair sometimes picks up a sense of the meeting, which I suspect is not quite so easy in this context. But I take the point about all the advantages in terms of saving better attendance, saving resources, etc., etc. So I think this is a different field from school governing boards, where I think that Teams has been a significant disadvantage, to be honest. But I don't think it's relevant to the schools forum.
Absolutely, and I think from Phil's and my perspective, I think chairing, you get a feel for it more. The more you do it, the more you can read responses. You feel that, Phil? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, then. So the recommendation is that we continue with virtual meetings, and our June meeting is a face-to-face. And obviously the building that will be in will be due to subject nearer the time, re-COVID. So can you please, if you're for, put your hands raised, please? That is for all school members, all forum members.
That looks fairly unanimous, Nikki.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone. So you want to put your hands down? Brilliant. Okay, so the last thing to say is our next meeting is the 30th of September, 2 till 4. All the information reports will be sent out in advance, and it will be on a virtual means. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We know how busy you all are, and thank you for all your views.
Can I just say one thing, Nikki,
yes,
before we sign off? Can I thank Jag and the IT team for doing all the recordings over the last year or so? They've been working really hard behind the scenes in making sure this all works. So thanks very much, Jag, and your team.
Thank you, Jag. Thank you to all the team.
And thanks, Nikki, for chairing today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.